Hello and welcome, my mystical friends. Today we're diving into a topic that is enchanting. The Fae, the little people, Fae folk. We have all heard stories about them. Mischievous sprites or beautiful elves in the glittering courts of the fairy. But if you spend any time in the modern, pagan or folk magic communities, you probably also heard a very strong and very consistent warning. Do not work with the Fae. When I say the word fairy, what comes to your mind? Is it Peter Pan's beautiful companion? Is it a guardian of nature? Maybe some mischievous figure? Well, for most of us, is a delicate and winged sprite, perhaps a helpful guardian of nature that is born from the art and literature of the Victorian and Edwardian eras. Yeah, this is the Tinkerbell archetype, whimsical, a little mischievous, but ultimately benign, good. So why the stern caution? What is it about this ethereal, magical beings that makes practitioners, both ancient and modern, advise to be careful with them? How about let's unravel the folklore, the dangers, and the very real reasons of why don't mess with the Fae has been repeated over and over among practitioners. Let's start by saying that this sanitized image is actually a relatively modern invention of an older, darker, and more dangerous tradition. For centuries, the Fae of the folklore were not whimsical playmates, but actually powerful and feared entities. They were blamed for sickness, for crop failure, even birth deformities. They stole children and even adults. Have you ever heard of the changelings? They took people into their otherworldly realm, and they could be both cruel and capricious, sometimes even without provocation. The Fae is a very broad umbrella term, so we're not just talking Tinkerbell here. This term encompasses a vast array of being: pixies, sprites, goblins, elves, banshee, the she, the unseelie and seelie courts, and so many others that are from different cultures around the world. What unites them is that they are non human, most of the time more powerful than us. They have some kind of magical gifts, and quite typically, they are immoral from a human perspective. I mean, even in the original Peter Pan story, Tinkerbell actually tries to kill Wendy out of jealousy because Wendy was getting a lot of attention from Peter Pan. So let's see about this piece of deeply encoded cultural wisdom that goes beyond a superstition, never to work with, bargain, or even attract the attention of the Fae. Let's go ahead and deconstruct this warning and let's argue what is the peril of the Fae if it's not just a matter of malice. Why have people and cultures see it as a fundamental and dangerous being? To engage with the Fae is to enter with a high stakes game where you don't even know the rules and where the penalty for losing can be quite big. The number one reason, and the one that is actually a little bit more known for this warning, is that they are notorious tricksters. They also are alien to human morality. They have a different set of ethics. They do not operate by human rules of right and wrong, good and evil because their view is different. And what might even seem like a harmless prank to a fairy could also be not so good for a human. Let's delve into a little more specifics. Folklore presents us with at least 3 conflicting origin stories, each with different implications for their relationship with the Fae and humanity. One view is that they are demoted angels, and maybe that's why they are always depicted with wings. This is a Christianized theory that cast them as angels who were not good enough for heaven, nor evil enough for hell. So they're not fallen angels, they're demoted angels. And thus they were cast out of the liminal spaces of earth. This framework positions them as being outside of divine grace. And they were even believed to pay a tithe to hell. From the pagan point of view, a second and highly influential theory positions them as diminished remnants of pre-Christian deities. The Tuatha De Danann of Irish mythology, for example, were a race of supernatural beings who, after being defeated by mortals, retreated into the hollow hills, becoming the Eos Sea. This origin casts the Fae as the original, powerful inhabitants of the land, who might view the humans as usurpers. Some people also believe that they are spirits of the dead. This third belief identifies them with spirits of the dead that are particularly those that have not been given a proper burial. This aligns with the conception of the realm fairyland as a timeless and other world resembling a pre-Christian's abode of the dead. So as we can see, there is some ambiguity to the Fae. One cannot reliably appeal to their piety or knowing that they are a demoted angel. Maybe they're an ancient pagan god. They're just nature sprites. So they have a lot of mutability from our point of view. They are a mystery. They can appear as beautiful human beings, troll-like figures, and some of them are even shapeshifters. No wonder we have so many definitions for them. Their outward form is just never a reliable indication of who they really are. As mentioned before, their ethics do not align with our own system. It is built on 2 pillars. There is a strict law of reciprocity and a hierarchy that places humans in a subordinate position to the Fae. The fundamental principle of absolute reciprocity is that a kindness will be repaid and is an insult that should be avenged if it's not. The peril for humans is that the Fae system of value is just extremely disproportionate to our own. They might trade a magical trinket for our fondest memory, for your name, maybe for a firstborn child, and they think that this bargain was perfectly balanced. Human societal customs are just dangerously incompatible with their systems, with their values. Offering a gift or saying thank you is in human culture just polite, is being pleasant. But for the Fae, these actions initiate a binding contract of debt. Accepting a simple flower or even expressing gratitude is a formal acknowledgement of this debt, placing our mortal souls in a position of obligation to the Fae. This is why sometimes the warning goes to never even be polite with the Fae. Don't say thank you. Don't give your name. And Let's compound this even with their capricious nature. Their actions are often driven by what they find interesting or fun, and they could help a human or they could harm one in a whim. Because for many of them, we are merely mortals' source of entertainment. In fact, many of them leave the fairy world to come into our space merely searching for fun and entertainment. So if you accept a gift from the Fae, if they offer you help and you accept that, be sure that there is always a prize. And if you accept this before anything has been said, this price is not only not clear upfront, is completely obscure. They deal in bargains, but their interpretation of a bargain can be very twisted. Folklore is full of stories of people who received a blessing from a fairy, but only to then find themselves having to pay a terrible cost later. Some of them have lost their memories, their luck, their loved ones, or they bargained their very own soul without even knowing it. Remember, their sense of reciprocity is not the same as ours. I'm sure you've heard the stories of fairies asking for your firstborn, for your ability to tell the truth, to dance for 100 years non-stop. You may think you're getting a great deal, but they are playing a different game. Now let's add to the dangers of the fairy. Have you heard of their glamour? Yeah, the illusion that Fae has mastered of disguise and enchantment. They can appear as incredibly beautiful, alluring. And sometimes they even use this to look harmless. But what you see is not what they truly are when they're using their glamour. They will lead you into traps, steal your time, or just confuse you. Think of the concept of being pixie-led or fairy-led. A pixie or fairy leading you, which describes this perfectly. You wander off the path. You become disoriented, and hours or even days pass by in what just feels few moments. When you finally return, or when you try to return, the world has moved on and you may find yourself changed, sometimes irrevocably. How about their hate for trespassing? The Fae is incredibly territorial and protective of some spaces. There are ancient forests, some hidden grooves, and fairy rings. Even unintentionally disturbing their homes or their sacred spaces is something that you definitely want to avoid. Many traditional practices emphasize the extreme respect when entering nature, especially to avoid offending the local spirits or the Fae. Leaving offerings, asking for permission, and moving quietly, maybe even quickly, are all ways that people do to try to avoid stepping into their proverbial toes. Sometimes, even with the best of intentions, you can still cross a line you didn't even know you were crossing. So the Fae is not inherently evil, but they're very different. They exist in a different realm. They operate on different rules, different energies. They have other priorities. So trying to engage with them, especially without a deep understanding of their nature, is just a way of protecting the masses, is to avoid having you navigate in a minefield blindfolded. So instead of spending hours trying to explain the natures and the dangers of working with the Fae, it's just easier to say, do not bargain with the Fae. So let's keep diving. In Scottish folklore, we have some of their most famous classification, the seelie and unseelie courts, which is often misinterpreted as a simple binary of good versus evil. So the unseelie court is comprised of overtly malevolent fae, openly hostile to humankind. The danger is straightforward. You see them, most likely they're out to get you. The seelie court, whose name means blessed or holy, which means that the unseelie means not blessed, the opposite of holy, is considered a more benevolent bunch, but they're still mischievous. However, just seeing them as good is still a mistake because they're still the Fae. They are still different, they are capricious, they still have a different ethics than we have. They're also, even if they're good, they are notoriously easy to offend, and their retribution can be severe. Some sources even say that the term seelie, blessed, the good neighbor, was actually used by mortals not to describe them, but as a form of appeasement. The seelie court is arguably a little threat. Their friendly nature invites further interaction and will lower your guard, making you far more vulnerable to the hidden cost of their reciprocity. The unseelie will declare war, so you know you have to defend yourself, while the seelie will invite you to dinner, present you with a bill after you have done eating. Now let's talk about other dangers that are not just of the Fae, but are deeply connected with them. The bargain. The Fae are magically bound by their word. This is one of the parts where folklore is very consistent. Apparently, they cannot tell a direct lie. However, this is not a guarantee of safety. It is their mechanism of treachery, and since they already have known how to work in loopholes, you have to be even more careful. Although unable to lie, they have a very elevated linguistic deception taken to an art form, adhering strictly to the letter with their agreements and their expression. So, bargaining with the Fae. Have you ever heard of the Faust bargain? Although this in Christianity is more related to demons or other kinds of evil spirits, it can also be done with the Fae. Can you see how here the spirits sort of mixed up? So folkloric tales are filled with examples. Let's say one farmer tricks a boggart by offering the tops or bottoms of the harvest in exchange of good luck. So, when planting wheat was when the boggart chose that he wants the bottoms, and planted turnips when it chooses the tops, rendering just useless this bargain for them. But they'd agreed. In another tale, a man forces a leprechaun to swear not to touch the garter he tied to a plant that is marking his gold. The leprechaun keeps his word, but ties an identical garter to every other plant in the field, so still makes the treasure impossible to find. Fae bargains are very rarely a source of wealth because you have to pay that with interest, just a different currency, something intangible, yet fundamental aspects of human existence. Again, As we talked before, the price can be your name, which, by the way, grants them power over you. They might really take away your fondest memory. What if they take your ability to feel joy? Maybe just a bit of your time. But think about it. That's not that they're wasting your time. They could take life from you, your time. Once a bargain has been struck, is magically and absolutely binding. For the Fae, language does not really describes reality. It creates it. So an oath is actually a spell that will bind their very being. And to break it will be to unravel their own identity. For a mortal, however, this creates a terrible prison. In attempting to break a bargain, invites for curses, abduction, servitude, as the Fae will neither forget nor forgive a broken contract. Surviving an encounter with the Fae will require adhering to a very complex set of laws, unwritten laws. At least from our side. Maybe they do have a written book of law, just never found it. Now, these are not suggestions, they are binding, as we have said before. So, let's dive deep into a few rules and taboos, the folkloric reasoning, or the why, and some examples of consequences of violating these rules or taboo. Never give your true name. A name is a metaphysical part of one's true identity. To give it away is to grant ownership and control to the recipient. The Fae may ask, "May I have your name?" instead of actually asking, "What is your name?" or "What can they call you?" as a literal request for possessing your name, for you to relinquish your name to them. So the consequences is that the Fae can control you, summon you, curse you, steal your identity, or prevent you from ever being recognized by others ever again. A more common rule or taboo, more popular, let's say, is to never accept gifts, food, or drinks. This acceptance, as said before, creates a binding debt under the law of reciprocity. Not only that, Fae food is also metaphysically attuned to their own realm, which can make escaping impossible. Think about even eating in the underworld and the story of Persephone in Hades. The consequences is that you become indebted to the Fae for a price of their choosing. Another rule, never say thank you. We already went over this as well in this because this phrase is interpreted as a formal acknowledgement of debt. It can be seen as an offer of servitude, creating a binding obligation. I believe that this is a metamorphosis from the way people used to say thank you as "at your service," which literally will put you at the service of the Fae. Think in Lord of the Rings, where Pippin says "at your service" to the king. Either way, by saying thank you, you place yourself in their debt, which they can call upon at any time. And they can also become very offended and punish you if you not answer to their call. Never lie or break a promise. As mentioned before, the Fae are magically bound to their own word and despise those who are not. Breaking an oath is a profound insult to their own nature. With this, you're not bound, but if you lie, you can find retribution as curses, loss of property, abduction, being forced into servitude, and who knows how many other ways. Let's see the rule about carrying iron. It says that it negates their magic. It can cause them pain and act as a powerful repellent. In this case, there's not really a consequence. But if you knowingly go and instead of just trying to repel unknown fairies to you and you are trying to get close to them, For some, this can be seen as a declaration of hostility. Well, just something to keep in mind. Another one is not to enter their fairy rings, their fairy mounds, and their sacred spaces, because these are actually portals to the other world, places of immense power. Is still, if uninvited, is trespassing for them. And as we said before, the consequences is that you can be trapped, you can die of exhaustion, and the time effects are completely different. So by the time you come out, if you come out, it may be a whole nother century back in our world. So as you can see, for most practitioners, the risk just outweighed the potential of rewards. And there are many other spirits, ancestors, divine beings that are much safer and predictable to work with if you are looking for some spiritual guidance or assistance. And because of this, the advice of countless others who have studied these beings is to admire the Fae from afar, enjoy their stories, their mystery. But when it comes to direct interaction, just heed for the warnings. Don't work with the Fae, don't bargain with the Fae. Especially because the rise of children's literature and romanticism that led into a sanitation of the Fae, it softened the harsher elements for a younger audience. Is how we went from the whimsical sprites that we know today, where they actually were seen as a source of terror. In closing, this folkloric warning to avoid the Fae is complex, and it comes from a very cultural side of magic, side of folklore, and of belief. It says that one should not work with them because they are fundamentally unknowable. Their morality is incompatible with our own. Their language is a weapon. Their laws are not only absolute, but they are magically binding. And they can be hostile, but with the use of glamour, we don't even realize. So, do with this information what you will. I will not tell you to work or not work with them. This is, after all, your decision and you have free will. But I would love to know, what are your thoughts on the Fae? Have you heard about any cautionary tales that I have not listed here? Share them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe.